Coming up on Theater Talk.
It's so sad what happened and what is still happening and what is still going on, and that this plague is completely ignored.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
That's my math teacher, Mr. Zufa. Rhymes with loofah, so you can remember. And he was the first dude to mentor me. And he was mentoring my ass all day long. Mr. Leguizamo. Mr. Leguizamo. You have the attention span of a sperm, Mr. Leguizamo.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
So, Michael, we have the star of the hottest one-person show on Broadway.
Well, I want to say, in 1998, this kid, he was a kid back then, came to Broadway in a show that I remember seeing, but I didn't know anything about it. I went to the opening night, completely knocked out by it. The show was called Freak. It made a star of the wonderful John Leguizamo, who came back to Broadway with Sexaholic, American Buffalo, and who's now on Broadway now with his new hit one-man show, Ghetto Klown. First time on Theater Talk. I don't know why it's taken you so long to get here, but welcome.
Why has it taken so long?
I don't know. You should have been here in Freak. I was a fan. I've been a fan for 10 years.
I didn't have the address or something. I don't know.
well, welcome, John. I want to ask you something, just kind of get a little newsy here. There used to be a Tony Award, a special award for unique theater experiences, things that weren't plays.
Special events.
Special events,
theatrical events.
Exactly. And, I mean, Ghetto Klown seems to me precisely the kind of thing that award was created to recognize, and yet they've done away with that.
Well, I'm so glad you started off this talk with that conversation.
How do you feel about that? Slighted by the Tonys?
Completely dismissed. You know, betrayed. Betrayed, if you could use that term. I think you had a lot of great shows that were capable to be in this category. You had the Kathy Griffith show. You had Pee Wee Herman making his big return to the world as Pee Wee. You had Colin Quinn, which was a great show that I saw and loved. And you had Donnie Marie, which was an event. And there's a lot of Christmas shows that come and they created this category to help shows, because one-man shows and comedies don't usually get the respect. It's really hard for us to compete with regular plays. I don't know why, but that's just the nature of things. Oscars, same thing. You know, comedies don't beat dramas. Just the way it goes.
And then they got rid of the category.
Then they got rid of the category. You can't just do that, man. You know, us artists, you know, we want to get that respect. We work really hard, and you're going to discourage other one-man shows from coming to Broadway. You're going to go straight to concert or whatever.
Something like Ghetto Klown, Sexaholic, or Freak. Do you consider them one-man shows? I mean, aren't they plays in your mind? You have written them out. You have crafted them as carefully as David Mamet crafts a play.
Absolutely. I've spent years crafting it, testing it, years and years of my time with Fisher Stevens, who was a great director, and it was very difficult, you know. And I do craft it as a play, but because it's a comedy and I'm by myself, people don't deem it a play. They still, because they're laughing so much, they don't understand the construct and the dramaturgy that goes into it. It gets lost because of the skill.
Yeah, right. Because when they're watching,
so skillful, it looks too easy.
It looks like he's up there. Just whatever's coming to your mind is what you make the joke of.
Yeah, I just tossed this thing out there. No, I've been working on it for years, and I took huge risks in this show. You know, revealing a lot of personal stuff that I normally just keep between me and my therapist or my publicist. But I chose to risk myself in the hopes of inspiring a whole new generation.
Did you make that decision now because you're an older artist now? You're more, I don't know, comfortable with yourself in revealing those kind of things?
I was not comfortable in revealing those things, and it took a lot of courage and testing it outside of New York City and in small towns where I saw the result. You know, talking about all my my failures, my fights, my battles, all the depression, talking about all those things is not things that I generally want to share with strangers. But I saw all these kids coming up to me in Tucson and in Chicago, in Berkeley, coming up to me going, I was going to quit acting, I was going to quit dancing, I was going to quit writing. All these kids, and they felt like, seeing your show, I saw that the battle is part of the journey, and it's not about fame or success. It's about questing for a chance to express yourself.
Can you give us an example of something in the show that you really
He was
struggled
going to
with?
go for it.
You really struggle. Really
He's not going to
struggled?
let me sneak out
I'm
of
not
here.
gonna. You're not gonna dodge this one. Well, listen, you're honest in the show.
Yeah.
You strike me as being a candid guy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of things. I mean, where do you want to start? What do you want?
The depression, sort of. That.
Yeah, I mean, to me, depression is part of being an artist, and you got to embrace that sucker because it's not going to go away. And the better an artist you are, the more you'll allow that, instead of, numbing yourself to it. But I've always been able to write. That's when I write. When I usually have a huge depression, it's when I can focus and write. It's very strange, but and it's usually been with breakups with women that I've loved dearly, and that's when I write. That's when I create my work.
When you've written something like that, something very, very personal, do you ever say, "I'm not going to be able to use this. I have to put it aside," or do you test out everything?
I test it all out. But there are certain things that I kept to myself. Like when I was writing Spicorama, which was kind of based on my family, but I just fictionalized it a lot because I was afraid of my parents.
Well, that's an important issue in this one too.
Yeah.
That you weren't afraid of your parents to write a lot of the material that you include in this play.
I'm not afraid in this one, and
Yeah.
and I'm much older, and I have a different perspective, and I've had kids. So by my age, I better get over my issues. You know what I mean?
But you insulted your parents to a certain
When I did
extent, and
Freak,
you
I
bring that in
really
there.
upset my father.
Yeah.
Really?
Intensely so. And he talked to lawyers. He was going to sue me to make me cease and desist. And I don't blame him. Now in retrospect, I understand. It was I revealed a lot of personal stuff that nobody wants to be seen that way. There was a lot of family. There was a lot of abuse in my family, and I put it. My parents were immigrants. They were incredibly ambitious, and this was a really difficult time to be a Latin man and a Latin woman in this country in the 60s. And they were crushed by it, and it created a lot of tension at home. And so I put that in the show, and my father didn't want people seeing that. I don't blame, who would want to see that up there and being ridiculed at the same time? So it was a double whammy.
Were your parents with you on opening night when they,
Oh, no.
They had seen all that before and they were...
My father came months later, like near the close, he came to see the show and he surprised me. I didn't know he was there.
Oh, really?
And he was devastated.
He was devastated.
And yet you put the fact that he was devastated into this new show.
Yeah, because we don't talk anymore. So,
That'll do
so
it.
I got nothing to lose.
But you were able to psychologically transcend their the reprisals and within yourself go, no, I'm going to go forward. I have to get this stuff out.
Yeah,
How were you able to do that?
I don't know. Maybe I'm masochistic. I'm not sure. Maybe that's part of it. But my biggest hero that in my life has been Richard Pryor, and Richard Pryor didn't.
It was all out there with him.
He didn't hold any punches, man. He put it all out there. He was one of the greatest comics in my mind, and I always aspire to be like him. I mean, he's my big idol and hero, and he talks about everything. The fights with his women, the drugs, everything, and being set on fire. He just put it all out there, and I found that so incredibly freeing for me as a Latin man, urban city. And just as an artist, just how freeing that made me feel, watching him be able to talk about all the dark things in life and realize that they're all part of life. And so I tried to do that, especially in Ghetto Klown. I started talking about a lot of other things and go to other issues just besides what happened with my parents. I do like a little Wikipedia thing at the top to catch up, to remind to fresh people or people who don't know me, just to catch up quickly, and then boom, we're in my career.
Where's John been all this time? Since
Yeah,
American
exactly.
Buffalo. Where's he been?
Oh, 10 years. It's been 10 years since I did a one-man show, so it's been a decade. But American Buffalo, right? Okay, that was too. But that was a short blip on the radar. So
That's right.
I knew you were going to talk about that.
This honesty thing.
I'm leaving.
It lasted 1 week
Hey,
on
I'm
Broadway.
trying-
He was brilliant, but sorry, folks. This honesty thing is interesting, though, because I would imagine when you are rummaging around your life, when you're creating these shows, if you don't go all the way with something, it's going to feel artificial to you and artificial to the people watching it.
I don't know if it's going to feel artificial to people watching, because there's a lot of shows that are very light, and very palatable and non-offensive, and so you can get away with whatever you want to get away with. To me, I wouldn't feel like I was giving my all. To me, I wouldn't feel that I was being Richard Pryor. To me, to Fisher and Fisher Stevens, both of us set the bar really high with each other to be as honest as possible. And the way we created the show, Well, let me backtrack a little bit. I started the show. I had a problem performing. I didn't want to perform anymore one-man shows. I didn't want to reveal myself. It gave me a bit of anxiety. So the way I tricked myself to performing again was I would do college talks, and I would use my career, my resume, and index cards, and I get really drunk at all these colleges, and I would talk for 2 hours, and the kids loved it. I was like, whoa, I got a show. Yeah. So I would run home quickly and write it before I passed out. And I did that for years till I had a bulk of the material. And I got myself back to performing and doing my stuff again.
Are you doing it drunk now on Broadway when you do Ghetto Klown?
I sip mildly. I mean, the problem is that I lose my voice. If I drink too much, I start pushing too hard.
But you've got that bottle of beer you're swigging from.
Yeah, but it's watered down.
It's what? But there is a little beer in there.
There's a little beer. Little duels.
So you're a performer
beer is not really beer.
Right. So, but your performer takes a little bit just to kind of take the edge off it.
Just take the edge. Just keep the smell of beer going. It's Pavlovian. It keeps me raw.
The Richard Burton of Colombia and Puerto Rico, right? This show has had a strange effect, shall we say, on some of the audiences. You know, a lot of Broadway audiences are a little reserved, give the standing ovation at the end, laugh at the right places. Your audience goes a little nuts for you. And your press agent sent me a note the other day saying that during your act, a couple went up to an usher and said, "Is there a place we can have sex in the theater?" I mean, what is it about you that inspires these people to...
But you got to appreciate the politeness. I mean, most people don't even ask. They just go find a place.
Go to the back balcony.
Yeah. Is that where it happens?
I don't know.
Okay.
So apparently there was some activity in the handicapped restroom, I'm told.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. Something about the show is turning people on because we found a thong in the handicapped bathroom.
But this is your crowd, I guess.
This is my crowd. I mean, I got a beautiful crowd. It's very young.
Yep.
It's very mixed. We got a lot of Latin. We have a lot of black. We have a lot of older white folk. I mean, it's a really beautiful mix of people.
And they adore you. They're screaming at you. And
they think it's call and response, which is fine for some parts of the show. And we got the highest alcohol bar. We had the biggest bar, the grossing bar on Broadway, which is another thank you to whoever allowed the alcohol to be going to seats.
I hope your agent gives you a little piece of the bar.
We're not allowed to collect.
Oh, right.
We're not allowed to collect. But I had a band ice. That was tinkling around was driving me nuts.
And when you're 80, are you going to still be doing one-man shows, John? Is this the art form for you?
I think it's one of the most powerful art forms. I don't know, man. I don't know what I have to say. I mean, my next one is not. This is my last play. I'm not writing any more plays. This is my last personal play. The next ones are going to be just avant-garde. I'm going to do Colin Quinn, basically. I want to do, nice intellectual pieces, political, and just stay away from the personal in the play.
Get that Tony Award for the next
Bring it back, yeah. Who do I have to call? Who do I have to vote? Who do we have to Twitter?
To get around Isabel Stevenson. All right, the show is called...
Hey, give me names.
Ghetto Klown at the Lyceum Theater. You're there till open-ended run?
So, July 10th.
July 10th. Don't miss it. It's a terrific show, and good luck in London.
Thank you very much.
That's me with my sad fro. I know, I wouldn't even sleep with me. And my father was like, mijo, cut that ugly thing off. You're not black. Well, actually, Dad, if you look at the hybrid chart, you can see that we Latin people are an all-you-can-eat buffet of DNA. I'm like a number 6 over there. No te entiendo con India. I don't understand what the hell you are, you Indian thing. Because when the Spaniards conquered us in the 1600s, they wanted to be able to order us like Starbucks coffee. I'll have a tall mestizo with a double shot of mulatto and a thumbo to go.
What exactly is it that you're trying to get me to do?
You have to tell gay men to stop having sex.
Sorry, what?
Somebody has to. Why not you?
Well, wouldn't it be better coming from you? It's a preposterous request.
It only sounds harsh. You wait a few more years, it won't sound so harsh.
We are very pleased to have with us tonight Larry Kramer, who is also the author of The Destiny of Me, Just Say No, and a very fine novel still in print called Faggots. Larry Kramer, welcome to Theater Talk. All right, this was a significant play politically, certainly in its time, still is, I think, today. Can you take us back to the writing of the play?
Well, I started writing it in '83,
Yeah.
and it took probably... Yeah, I took a year to write and a year to get on. Everybody in the world turned it down. Every agent you can think of, every theater company, every director, you name it, a who's who of directors turned it down. I knew many of them, and I sent it to them all. And I was afraid to give it to Joe Papp because I had heard he was difficult, and I knew I was difficult, and I was afraid we'd have fights. And so he was last on the list, and as fate would have it, that's where it wound up, and it was an exceedingly moving relationship with Joe and his wife.
Now, rather than asking you why people turned it down, I'll ask you to tell us what it's about what you wrote about in 1983.
It was about the first cases of AIDS. It's really a history play now, if anybody. I'm finding that it's being done all over the world, and the further the plague extends itself into the far reaches of the wilderness, the more it is treated as a history play. People want to know, where did this come from? And it gets produced in places I have never heard of, and in places where I don't get royalties from. But that's okay. It was just very hard to get the word out about what was happening to initially just to gay men, and it made me very mad, and I don't like to get mad. So.
Did you write it in just kind of a white heat, a sort of a fury?
I wrote it in several white heats, yes. It was, yes, I did. And in those days, it was about anger. Today, it's just about tears. I cried my way all the way through rehearsals. I just did. It's so sad what happened and what is still happening and what is still going on, and that this plague is completely ignored. You know, here are these kids going on about 100 cases or 200 cases, and it seemed like mammoth in those days, but it was all happening around us, so my group of friends. So it seemed like a million, but that, and everybody's screaming. You go in and say, who are these kids screaming about 100 cases? And then you come out of the end of the play, there's this big poster that says 70 million people have been infected.
Do you remember when when AIDS, it wasn't even called AIDS then, when you first were aware that something was going on?
Yeah. There were little isolated incidents. The image always I remember is I had a friend, two friends, Nick Rock and Enno Porsche, and Nick was very short and Enno was exceedingly tall, and they were lovers. And Nick was sick, and Big Enno was carrying little Nick around both Fire Island and the city, literally in his arms, and saying, do you have any idea what's wrong with him? Do you know anything? Because no one knew anything. And have you seen anything like this? Or whatever. The doctors diagnosed him as having cat scratch fever, whatever that was. And both of them died eventually. And then the Times article on whatever it was, July 3rd, 1981, that was the call to arms.
But you had been pushing for that, though, before that Times article came out. Weren't you pushing the newspapers to do?
No, that was the call to arms. And it's because of that article that I went to the Times and tried to get them to write some more, without success.
But I would think, though, you should have tremendous pride about back then when it was so hard to get anybody with power to recognize AIDS or do anything about it, and you were out there insisting.
Thank you. But again, it's a work of, it's an act of art. It's an act of, I don't call myself an artist, but it's not sitting down to, write the Communist Manifesto.
Yes.
And you had that problem with faggots, too, when it first came out? Before you were Larry Kramer, the activist, people didn't pay attention to the writing. What were they calling you then?
Oh, I don't know. What were they calling me then? I don't know. But they started calling me it very fast after the book came out.
Well, in Faggots, you were sort of, it was a romantic play that you were putting some real people and describing that world.
That wasn't it.
No.
It was basically, I was saying everybody was f***ing themselves to death, if I can say that on this channel, and
they didn't want to hear that.
And they didn't want to hear it. And it was before we were actually f***ing each other to death, but as a metaphor, we were. And my favorite line in the book, having so much sex makes finding love impossible.
Yes.
And this is an odyssey by a man who's desperately looking for love and unable to find it, and that's what he comes up with because everybody was having so much sex. And I became known as being someone wrongly that was, a prude and against sex and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't that. It was just against promiscuity.
Well, and I found myself wondering, again, while watching The Normal Heart the other day, where you have the doctor make the point that once AIDS hit, that still the gay men weren't willing to give up sex, and that this was
Still aren't.
And the whole, now that this is spread to the whole world, that people, isn't that the problem? Still, there's just not the consciousness that this is.
Well, it's turned out to be this huge problem, and I don't know that. Anyway, who knows?
I mean, but Ken, you're asking, so if you ask the human beings to give up sex, you're asking them to give up primal.
Well, initially.
Well, not give it up, be responsible about it.
Well, initially we were saying not give it up, but cool it for a while until we find out what's causing this. And it was 3 or 4 years before we found out what was causing it, which was what it was expected to be, which was a virus. And if condoms had been used from the very beginning, we wouldn't be in the. But it's more than that. There was no responsibility taken on the part of public officials. Mm-hmm. The big heavy, and no one ever listens to me on this, the biggest heavy in the rapid spread of AIDS was Ed Koch.
Yep.
No question. He gets away with it. He gets away with murder. No one writes about him as being the cause of all this. He would not do a thing. He had a wretched commissioner of health, David Sencer, who also would not do a thing. We couldn't get meetings with him. It was going up and up and up and up. He didn't do anything. This is the biggest city in the world, his city. It was on his watch that this all happened. I'm sorry. The buck stops here.
Well, you address it in the Normal Heart. I mean, you go after Koch.
Yes, but everybody
in this
says
play.
Larry Kramer has got this vendetta against Ed Koch as if it's a personal thing. This is an historic thing. The fact that the New York Times did a terrible job has been written about academically now. You know they did a terrible job.
They admit to it in some.
And they admit to it.
Yeah.
But Ed Koch is still denying it because there hasn't been an academic book out there saying this is how it was. Do you know that the records, the health department records for these years have been lost? Ha ha ha. Mysteriously lost. So someone has the paper trail has been destroyed.
And of course, we invite him on this program to discuss.
Well, and there was a Times article last week where he apologized. He should have seen me, he said. Thanks a lot, but no thanks. I got the idea how to write The Normal Heart by going to see, when I was in London, seeing David Here's Plenty at the National, and I said, oh, he's got real people in there. He's got politicians, he's got statesmen, and they're all saying nasty things about each other. I can do that.
Did you study then that play, Plenty?
No, it just rang a bell. And then I went to suddenly got on a train and I went to Munich, and I didn't know why I had gotten on the train to go to Munich. And when I got to Munich, there was a sign that said Dachau, and I said, oh, that's why I came to Munich. And I went to Dachau, and it said it had opened in 1933. And I said, holy shit, where was everybody between 1933 and 1941 in this country? And it's the same thing as with AIDS. That was my metaphor, really.
Yes.
Somehow.
And that's when you started writing it, or?
I got thrown out of GMHC, which is what the play is about.
Yeah, right.
And that was, and I went to London and I started writing there, and then I went to Dachau, and then I went to Cape Cod and did one draft there, and sent it to my agent. It was the great play agent of our time was a woman called Peggy Ramsey, Margaret Ramsey, who was my agent, and she said, "Darling, you've got to play."
Made me sound like I'm the enemy.
I'm beginning to think that you and your straight world are our enemy. I'm furious with you. And with myself, and with every goddamn doctor who ever told me I'm sick and interfered with my loving a man. I'm trying to understand why nobody wants to hear that we're dying. Why nobody wants to help. Why my own brother doesn't want to help.
Mama said there'll be days like this. There'll be days like this, my mama said. Mama said there'll be days like this. There'll be days like this, my mama said.
Hi, Andrew here for Theater Talk.
We're at the 2011 Tony Awards nominee reception. Let's go meet some nominees.
Is there a line from the show that describes how you felt when you heard about the nomination?
Wow. I'm sure there is.
Gosh, you guys, I'm freaking out.
I was silent, so it was like a pause.
I think of my daughter's line. I said, baby, I just got nominated for a Tony. And she said, what does that mean?
Holy Jesus, Maggie Walsh. So that was how I was feeling.
There's a lot of shows about addiction and vices on Broadway right now. Do you have a guilty pleasure or a vice yourself?
Yeah, lots. Yeah, well, I was raised Catholic, and Protestant, so I got double guilt, like those chocolate bars.
Beside the fact I sleep with dogs, some people have called us animal hoarders because we do have 22 dogs that live in our house.
I am obsessed with hoarders on A&E, but with all of a sudden there's just weird dead cats that have boxes of kittens that have been forgotten.
I will just get something into my head and just YouTube it and just watch everything I can find on YouTube. It could be any high school production of Guys and Dolls. One night I'll just have to see all of them. So yeah, YouTube remains a constant vice in my life, aside from the booze and the dope.
Yes, coffee. The girls at Starbucks know who I am. They see me coming. And once I went to Dunkin' Donuts across the street, and the next day they were like, we saw you. We saw you going to Dunkin' Donuts. Don't ever do that again. I was like, you're right. That was crazy.
Pizza. If I could do something to make me get free pizza for my whole entire life, that would make me happier than a Tony Award.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.